And we are recording. So I was going to run this by you real quick before we get into the good stuff. I got our basically end of the year from Spotify, and it said, other than your show, here are the top 5 shows your listeners also listen to. And I don't know what this says about us, but here's what we got. Number 1, Joe Rogan. Big surprise.
Yeah.
Number 2, anything Barstool Sports. Number 3, PBD. Number 4, Tucker Carlson.
I love Tucker.
Number 5, Theo Vaughn. So that's interesting. I mean, that's pretty much dead on to who we are. You know, it's like
Maybe
25.
are you just listening to our episodes and then it's tripping
Maybe
the algorithm?
25 to 55-year-old men who lean conservative and don't buy into the common narrative and also aren't afraid of a joke. Yep. So
thick skin, baby. Thick skin producers.
All right. So let's get into this. Today's episode is called Death of the Old School Producer. And so here's what I want to do. We'll get into the Confessions of a Mediocre Producer updates at the end of the episode. That's what we're going to start doing, just doing them at the end. So stick around for that if you care about that. If you don't care about it, then, no worries. So in this episode, what I basically did is I went to our friend ChatGPT and I said, hey, Chat, tell me some characteristics of old school agents versus new school agents. Basically, what are agents going to need to do in 2025 to thrive? And what is going to basically no longer effective? And then we are going to go through and we are going to either confirm or deny. Say, oh, totally agree, or no, that's stupid. And then, kind of go into it. So let's start off with the big number one thing that everybody cares about, prospecting. Here's what ChatGPT has to say. Old school agents rely on cold calling, direct mail, networking, door-to-door. New school focuses on digital, content creation, LinkedIn networking, using CRM tools to nurture leads through automation. So what's your take?
Old school all the way, baby.
I agree.
At least, and let's add a caveat on here. If you're trying to write mid-market commercial business, that's just that new school way I don't think is working. I mean, sorry. I mean, unless you're doing high volume, low ticket commercial insurance, you guys paying 20, 30, 40 grand, maybe 10 grand, and you're doing that model. Yeah, I think if you can play the SEO game, the algorithm game, but that takes years to build, takes a lot of expertise that a lot of us don't have. If you have that, more power to you. I'm jealous. Maybe you should go start a podcast or a show or a course and try to sell it to other producers. Because I think everyone wants that easy button, but it's not very easy and it takes a lot of time. So as you always say, other things work, but the quickest way to build $100,000, to write 100,000 and to build a book is cold calling still in 2025.
So I agree. Here's my take on it. I think that you should, it's like, it's a both and type of thing, not a binary either or. So I think you absolutely, when you first start, you got to have the hand-to-hand combat, the one-to-one in the trenches, the cold calling. Now, if you, that only takes a couple hours a day. And then, so if you want to fart around online and you want to start a newsletter or you want to write content, I think you should totally do that. And I would recommend doing that so that, when people come to vet you out after you've reached out to them through cold outbound, and then they come to see, oh, who's this Mike Asalas guy? And then they look and see that you're basically the guy on LinkedIn regarding, construction risk. They're like, oh, this guy checks out. It's great for conversion. I would say LinkedIn's not great for lead generation. Now, one caveat being attractive females. If you are an attractive female, then by all means play the card you're dealt. But if you have a face made for radio like me, then it's probably not the best play.
What about attractive males? I mean,
Oh God,
just throw that out there. I don't know. Does that work? I mean, I don't know.
I
I
don't
guess
know.
neither of us are good looking enough to know. But
Or you just have to
next,
like really make sure that you only send stuff to female,
I mean,
C-suite.
there's a lot of women buyers out there, or you kind of deal with a lot of women like at these companies. I mean, controllers, CFOs. I mean, even owners, husband and wife teams, and you know, um, so it is interesting because there is. I feel like if I went through all my accounts, it's probably 50-50 in terms of like, which I guess it should be, right? Because that's the population. But in terms of who I'm
Well,
dealing with,
you're the Antonio Banderas between the two of us. So what you should do is you should test it out. So I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, but um, you know, there are some people who aren't so, what would the word be? Hmm, conservative.
aesthetically pleasing. Oh,
No, so conservative if with their wardrobe choices when they choose to take selfies, right? So why don't you just start doing all of your content shirtless?
that'd be awesome
And
on
then
LinkedIn.
when someone calls you out on it, then you totally just gaslight the shit out of them and say, "Oh, how dare you?"
Or so like the shirt I'm wearing now, I should just have no shirt underneath it, just cover
Yes,
the
yes.
nipples.
No, but the best part is when
Uh,
somebody points it out, you totally just gaslight them. That's my favorite. That is my absolute
yeah.
favorite. They're like, "Oh, how dare you notice?" Oh,
What,
give me a
yeah.
break. All right. Number 2, communication style. This is what ChatGPT has to say. Old school, prefers face-to-face meetings, phone calls, handwritten notes. New school, email, text message, DM, video conferencing. I I'm going to go first on this one. I think it's a blend of each, right? I don't
Yeah.
think it's ever you're never going to face out face to face, at least not I don't think so, not in our at least not in the next 10 to 20 years. But it's like it's all of the above. You just use what you need. Some clients want to be seen face to face. Others don't mind hopping on a Zoom. So again, I don't think it's either or. I think it's kind of both and.
Yeah, I would say you got to communicate with your clients how they want to be communicated with. So, I have some clients that are like, "Hey, dude, I don't even want to do Teams. Just call me on my phone. I'm up, 3 hours away anyways. I'm always on the road. I'm busy at job sites. That's what I want." Some clients want to be taken to lunch in person, and get a written letter from you every Christmas or something. So, yeah, I think if you get stuck in thinking how you want to communicate, that's the one thing you got to be careful of. It's not about how you prefer to communicate. It's how a prospect prefers to be communicated with. Or if there's a certain communication style you don't like dealing with, then you know that up front, and that's kind of one of your filters. Like, don't want to work with this person. They make me visit in person. I really don't want to travel 4 hours to see someone. Well, then you know that when you're prospecting and building your list. So yeah, that's interesting.
All right, number 3, specialization. Old school producers act as a generalist. New school producers specialize in niches to position themselves as an expert. What's your take?
I know you love niches. I know we talk about niching. I can see how niching makes a ton of sense, and I'm a fan of doing it. I'm basically niched into construction, um, but so I agree. I think that the wave of new school, I think that makes a ton of sense. However, if you find yourself acting as a generalist, you can still have a ton of success. I see it at my agency I'm at now. I saw it at Marsh, where I was at previously. So don't fall into the trap like thinking, oh man, I can only do this one class of business because everyone's talking about niching. No, you can do whatever you want to do and be successful. Um, I think the biggest thing is, and I shared this story, I think, on a previous episode. I just wrote a new account. They were a retailer. I was referred in there. It's not my class of, it's not my expertise, But I had someone at my agency that really knew that well, that knew that market. I just picked their brain. I was like, hey, for like 10 minutes. And if you know insurance really well, like the core pillars of insurance, there's little caveats with each industry, and that's all you got to learn. But if you know the core basics, you should be able to kind of write almost any business. Um, but the numbers don't lie. If you look at all the fancy research and reports, the producers who do niche tend to do a lot better from just an overall revenue standpoint. I think size of book and how they grow. So there's something to be said for that, but it doesn't mean there's not exceptions to the rule. So that's my feeling and my take on it. I don't know what you're thinking.
No, I would agree. I'm with you on
Yep.
that. I think at least in the get go, as far for list building, you know, actually getting started, I think picking an industry and building a lead list inside that industry is the best way to get started. A lot of times we get paralyzation by what's that term?
Oh,
Paralysis by analysis.
analysis.
And
Yep.
so it's
Yep.
kind of like when you don't have any guardrails up, then you can call everybody. Then you tend to call nobody because you just don't know where to start. So I,
Yep.
I like niching to start with. That's what I'm currently doing as I'm rebuilding. And then yeah, I mean, as referrals come in, or you just want to branch out. I mean, it's like our buddy Ryan Henley says, like insurance is insurance. And so I do agree with that, but I will say, especially like if you're in a market like I'm in, where everything's ENS, or if you are in a specialized, like for instance, tow trucks. I write tow trucks. Dude, there's just appointments that you're not going to have that you will need to write tow trucks. So it's,
Correct.
specialization definitely has its place. If you're a guy that writes construction and then you get brought in on a tow truck and you don't have all the markets because it's not your niche, well, I'll beat you every time.
Yep. Well, and if you're
Well,
thinking about
not
joining an
every.
agency, if you're thinking about joining an agency or starting over or whatever, you better make sure, or maybe you're starting your own agency. Um, that's where niching can be really helpful too, because it's really tough to get contracts maybe. And so pick your two or three options, and then that's where you got to go all in to start, until you get enough volume to go from there. So,
All right, number 4. They categorized it as branding, but I don't necessarily think it's branding. This basically says old school relies on personal reputation within a local geographic area or community. New school builds a personal brand to reach a regional or national audience. And I think they're trying to position this more as a social media play, which again, you know how we feel about that.
hmm.
Uh, Not against it, but it's not going to get you. It's not, that's a long term play. Cold call in the short, or knock on doors in the short term. If you want to build your online presence long term, be my guest. I am. You don't, doesn't mean you have to. Um, but I absolutely agree with the local versus regional or national. So I think, that is the play long term. And again, this goes into the niching thing. If you do choose to niche, I think you can hit a much larger area than if you're just local, right? Because how many HVAC guys are there in your 100-mile radius? I mean, there's probably a lot, but not a lot with any meat on the bone.
Yeah.
But if you write HVAC in 3 or 4 states, or horizontal drillers, or metal fab, you know, gives you a lot more opportunity. So that's my take.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think location of the agent doesn't matter as much as it used to anymore. So I think there's definitely old school would be like you're bound to couple mile radius. I think new school is, hey, the world's your oyster. Like wherever, especially if you niche, then you probably, like you said, you have to expand outside of a little small geographic region. So yeah, I would. I don't know I don't know what I'm really saying other than that I agree that I guess new school would be the way I would align with here.
Okay. Last one, tools and tech. Old school relies on paper files, spreadsheets, Rolodexes, manual processes. New school utilizes modern tools like AMS, data analytics, AI, CRMs.
Well, I mean, I'm
I
all
think that's
about
a no-brainer.
CRMs. Yeah, I mean, I still like old school for certain things. I keep my daily stats on cold calling and all that, but and I still like paper in front of me, like a printed out follow up later list or a pipeline printed out. But nothing replaces my number one tool is CRM and digitizing and systematizing, I guess, the whole follow up and calling people, so I don't have to think about it because I'm going to forget about all the people I call. So that is my number one tool as a producer. I mean, so if you're not, I'm always shocked the people that don't use CRMs. And uh, even in like 2014 through 2017, 18, when we would acquire agencies at MMA where I was at, these guys just didn't use a CRM at all. I'm just like, how do you keep track of, like, they don't make cold calls. That's the thing though. They're not cold calling people. They're just working off referrals and networks, and that's how they work. So they feel no, but even if you're doing that, I would still argue you should be using a CRM to track those people, because how are you keeping track of your COIs and your centers of influence, and anyone you've been referred to, because you should be treating them as prospects then. So I can't think of a good reason for not to be new school and not to use a CRM. And honestly, new school has kind of been, man, CRM's been around since what, 2000? So time to get with the times if you're not using one.
Yes, I concur. So I'm gonna kind of take this off road here for a little bit.
Oh,
Just I got this. You're talking about people reaching out to you and asking you about CRMs, and I'm gonna keep this anonymous. This producer, very nice, so I want to be respectful and keep anonymity. But it says, "Hey Trey, thanks for the podcast. We're big fans of yours and Micah's over here." It's kind of weird. All right, I don't want that sounded bad. It's not weird. It's weird me reading it. I'm wondering how you manage the calls you're making in your niches. How do you make sure that other agents in your office aren't calling the same people? We have a niche in my office, and there are 4 to 5 of us working it. Before calling, we're supposed to look for the prospect in our AMS, and if it's not there, it's fair game. Then we need to add them and log the call to claim them as our prospect. Is there a better way? So it's kind of going off of what you said. But if you're not using a C, like if an agent isn't using a CRM, or if that seems like a tedious process, then I would say like that's probably a telltale sign that you're not really doing a lot of cold prospecting.
mm,
Um, because I don't see how you can do it without a CRM. And granted, you could use a Rolodex or whatever, but if you're actually making the volume of calls, like if you
yeah.
look back at Confessions of a Mediocre Producer and how many calls it took to land one person, it's like there's no way you can remember all those follow-ups and all that stuff in just one call. I mean, on a piece of paper, or at least I can't. Um,
No.
but it's the real thing is like we're talking about this old school versus new school, and we've talked about this before. But we view the cold call. People view cold calling as old school, and maybe because it's been around for a long time, and you don't want to do it, or you're not very good at it, or you don't know how to do it. It's viewed as negative or old school. But I would argue that cold calling is, I mean, not that it's new school, but I guess the way things were traditionally done, at least from what I understand, is you had a family owns an agency. It's a smaller, independently owned agency. The dad's a member at a golf course. He has his
Mm,
buddies. You kind of like mix it up and do whatever. And the reason why I actually think cold calling is the way you have to get started now is because thanks to the internet, thanks to the fact that our world has gotten so much bigger and now everybody knows everybody or is connected with everybody, that no longer works. Like the way I think that you get in the door is by being the person who makes the call at the right time with the right message to the right person. Because I think every business owner knows 5 to 10 agents, or at least larger mid-market business owners, because they're getting
mm.
They know a lot. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just my take on it. You have to have a CRM, and you have to be cold prospecting. Uh, unless
It's
unless your last name is Biden and Kardashian, and you've got a huge network built in from mom and dad. I mean, I just maybe there's a
yeah,
better way, but I haven't found it.
that's a good point. I actually, it's a good angle because yeah, we do. I think cold calling is old school in other professions, but I do think in insurance it is kind of, there was always people cold calling, I'm sure. But people in the 90s, early 2000s, you didn't get hired at an agency unless you kind of knew someone, right? Or you played a sport at a local college, or your dad was at the church and knows everybody, or whatever. Yeah, I'm sure those guys were doing some cold calling, but a lot of them were kind of like trying to work that family friend list and kind of like the life insurance approach. Yeah, that's actually a good point that cold calling is kind of new school. And I remember this, in my early days at the prior agency, it was like, I can always remember this. I wrote a really nice account, or I got on a streak one time where I literally picked up like, dude, it was like 8 or 9 BORs in like a 2 month span, right? At about my year and a half mark. And everyone's like, dude, what are you doing, man? How'd you get in there? They'd always come to my door, at the office, the old guy, hey, how'd you get in that account? Because they weren't like tiny accounts, they were nice size, and I'd be like, oh, I just called them. Like, that's all, like, what did you say? Or like, people are just flabbergasted. I'm like, dude, it's, I don't know. I'm not doing anything special. I'm just saying this stupid script that is like so basic. And that's it you know, ask if people would be open to having a conversation. Some people say yes, some say no, and I move on and keep track of them and call the people back that said to call them back. That's really all I do, and it just blows people's mind. But yeah, it's like uh, people just find this thing like people have this thought in their head like where they get all offended or like they feel like cold calling so like aggressive or something. I'm like, dude, I think that mindset is just that's your problem if that's your mindset about cold calling, how you view it. So, yeah, it's interesting, but that's a good. I like your take on that. So I would say cold calling is kind of new school.
Yeah, I haven't fleshed that out totally in my brain. But that's kind of like, yeah,
New school for
it is
insurance
kind
agents
of an it is
specifically. Yeah.
it's a newer modality for our industry. I'd say
For
being widely accepted for sure.
yeah, yeah.
And then you've got guys on social media that are, trying to convince you that you just need to learn how to be a content creator and webinars and all this stuff. And I mean, hey, if you
Yep.
want to give it a try, go for it. But
Well,
I don't think anything can replace the cold outbound. In my opinion, that's got to be the pillar.
we should probably answer the question the guy asked you in that message because it is an interesting conundrum to be in at an agency where he's saying, um, "Hey, we have 4 other guys calling and like we're tripping over each other a lot." So he's like, "What do you do?" kind of thing,
Well, first
right?
of all, that's very sexist of you to assume that it's a male.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It is actually a female, just so you know.
My apologies.
My apologies. Go ahead. Sorry.
So yeah, that sucks. I mean, if I was in that situation, I'd kind of be like, who's left to call? Because I'm just thinking like there can't be that many prospects in this geographic region. And what I would maybe do is just start expanding outside of that. I'd see what other states our carriers are licensed in, and I'd be like, okay, you guys can call. I don't know where this person's at, Pittsburgh. I'm going to start calling over in Ohio or West Pennsylvania or whatever, or Philadelphia or something. Um, because it sounds like it's kind of saturated in that office in that one niche. So that'd be my first recommendation is maybe you just find a whole new niche that none of the other 4 guys are calling in or gals and call there. But otherwise, if they're not willing to
Assuming
do
you
that, or
have the appointments.
yeah, okay. So if they're not willing to do that and you're at that agency, I would just say we got to do this better, guys. Like we at this point, what we might as well do, let's take the list of all the prospects. It's 200 and divide it 4 ways. You own these 50, I own these 50, and some people might get lucky. They get the guys who are pissed. Some people might get the guys who are, totally in love with their agent and they're kind of screwed, but that's the only way to do it really if you're going to play that kind of game. And then yeah, if you find new ones, sure, add them. But to have to be checking every time you're calling and like, Yeah, I mean, I was doing that at my prior agency. I would always look up. We were supposed to look them up in Salesforce before we called them, and the kind of the rule of thumb is just if you're own an agency or you have guys working underneath you, is like it's like, hey, if they haven't been called in, like there's been no call activity on them in like 4 months, it's kind of free game. 4 to 6 months. If there's been some activity, just reach out to that producer and see kind of what their attitude is. Like, hey, have you got anywhere? Were you introduced to them 3 years ago and nothing kind of fizzled out? Like, and hopefully the other producer is cool and like willing to let it go if you have an in. And then if no one's ever got in touch with someone, I mean, in my opinion, it's like everyone in the office should be able to call that person if they want to. Not everyone's going to, and that maybe doesn't look good for the agency, but it kind of sucks to just because someone's sitting there hogging, let's say hogging all the accounts in Salesforce, and you're sitting over here and like, man, they just entered 50 accounts really fast. Now I can't call any of those 50. Well, that kind of sucks too. So it's just a weird situation. Um, that's why I always kind of find like it should kind of be open game, right? Just if an account's out there, no one owns it. If someone else is calling on them, who cares? It doesn't mean you're calling them the same day, and whoever gets into the deal gets in the deal. I don't know. There's not a good solution to that problem, but
Yeah, but squatters suck. I hate squatters. A lot of those going around,
well, that's why it was.
especially
I
at a
remember.
big agency.
Well, so that's what people's frustration was at the prior agency, is that you had young guys like me trying to grow my book, and I used Salesforce as really just a tracking system, right? I wasn't saying I own these prospects. I was just saying I'm entering in there so I can keep track of them, so I remember to call them back. And these old guys would be like, well, I see Micah's on this account. I was like, well, yeah, dude, I'm on probably 800 accounts. But it doesn't mean I own them, because I was like, it just means I'm calling them. So really, you need to set your CRM system so multiple people can be on a suspect. There's a difference between a suspect and a prospect. Suspect is I've never talked to the person, never gotten anywhere. Prospect to me is like you actually had a conversation, they told you to call them back. There's been some type of progress made. And suspects should be treated as open game. And in your CRM system, if you work at an agency, I think every single agent who wants to be added on that should be able to be added on that. And hopefully it's set up in a way where you can see everyone's call activity. And then like, hey, if you're about to call him, like, man, this other guy in my office called him 5 times last week. Now it's on you. Do you want to call him? You can if you want. Maybe you don't. And that's kind of the fairest way to do it, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, that's going to ruffle a lot of feathers. I'm
I don't
game,
care. That's
but
just real talk right there, baby.
you get the relationship guys, because their brother's cousin's guy plays soccer or plays softball, and he, sent him an email one time, but the guy never responded, but they're squatting on it, and they are not going to like it if you get in. You know, that's just the way it works. Anyways, all right. Moving on. Any advice to myself or any other uh producers out there for how to thrive in 2025?
Discipline. We all get caught up in cute motivational phrases like thrive in 2025 and whatever other mindset motivation kind of things you'll hear, and I love all that stuff. It's cool, whatever pumps you up, but man, I think discipline and consistency trump all that stuff. That's the biggest thing I take away after doing this thing for 13 years. Because there's going to be days you feel like doing it, there's going to be days you don't feel like doing it, just the way it is. And if you can set a level, a standard that you hold yourself to, whatever that is. For me and you, it's 40 calls a day. You set that standard, and that's what you hit every single day, and you stay disciplined. I think good things will happen. And so, um, I think I'm going to say it now because you've been doing Confessions of a Mediocre Producer. I told you, I think you've been saying you should post your stats. I never have. I used to keep them religiously. I keep them every day. I don't necessarily accumulate them on a weekly basis, but I made the decision, since it's 2025, I'm going to thrive, that yesterday being the first kind of full day cold calling in 2025, I'm going to keep my stats, put them in an Excel spreadsheet on a daily, weekly basis and accumulate them. And so I launched a Substack also because we've been talking about newsletters. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to, I have LinkedIn. That's more for buyers, a lot of it, and, insurance stuff. I'm going to start a Substack to talk about anything I want to talk about. But right now, the topic is going to be mainly sales. And I'm going to, so I launched that. It's just at Micah Salas if you're on Substack. And what I'm gonna do is keep daily statistics. I think I'm gonna try to post the daily ones on LinkedIn, but then I'm gonna do like a weekly letter on just some thoughts and you know, what I learned from making 200 calls that week.
I too am going to keep the stats, and again, I will kick myself on the days I don't feel like it. I've made 0 calls today, so
So we gotta get
yeah.
off this
So I
podcast and you
yes,
gotta get
so
on
I've
the
got to
horn.
go make some so I can put something up there. I will say it is not because of whatever. I've actually just been building my list in X date so that I am primed to be able to make all the calls, right? So I built them out, scrubbed it. I've got 40 for Wednesday, 40 for Thursday. Anyways, so I don't want to do it, but it is just accountability, necessary evil. Why not? Just fucking do it.
Yeah.
So I will also be posting my activity um, for the foreseeable future.
Yep. Good stuff.
So,
But
all right,
that's my
listen in
key.
there.
That's my key.
Discipline.
Discipline.
All right. Uh, so real quick, Confessions of a Mediocre Producer. We're coming out of the holidays. We've already talked about this, but I've basically been using this time to prep, get my list ready. Um, I have had 2 or 3 loose ends that have popped up this week as far as like those BORs. Some of the BORs finally hit. The guy also gave me some other stuff I've got to work, some property accounts that tied in with some other stuff, existing accounts. So I've just been doing a bunch of BS yesterday and today, and also trying to build out my lists. So, anyways, my goal is to hit as many as I can between now and 3 o'clock, and then hopefully Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I can hit the 40 a day. So that's the plan.
You can do it. You can do it.
Also, I don't know if we're gonna get it or not, but got spun off a very nice referral. That's probably, I'm gonna guess, minimum of 75K
From this account you
from
just
one of my
guessed?
no from one of my
Oh, okay.
larger transportation related accounts. So I'm really hoping to slam dunk that some gun. So,
Dude, that would
anyways,
be freaking awesome.
plenty to do, plenty to do. I just, as my, you know, before we started Confessions of a Mediocre Producer, I had in my first year and some change, I had wrote 10 half a dozen people, and so as I'm going to enter that phase to where I've got to really manage my time well, because when you first start, you have all the time in the world, but as you start to get clients, and hey, I needed this, or hey, I need that, or hey, whatever, I'm getting to that point where like I've really got to be good about my time, or else I'm not going to be able to hit my prospecting activity.
Yep. It gets tougher.
So, anyways, all right, dude, listen it there. I gotta make some calls.
All right. Good luck, man.
Oh, hey, by the way, is butt cheeks 2 word, or should I separate them?
I think
See
it's
ya.